Almost all code right now is written by AI,
Right.
regardless of team. AI is funny because it gives everybody the idea that they understand everybody else's domain better. All a good prototype shows you is that you can prompt. It doesn't show you that anybody cares about the problem.
This is the Future of the Future show. I am your host, Mateo Berbejicio. Today's conversation addresses one of the biggest questions facing the technology industry. Is AI changing how software gets built? And is it truly changing what it means to be a great engineer? As development accelerates and expectations soar, what's genuine transformation and what's just hype? To explore that, I am joined by Cameo Doran, a technology executive and engineering leader who has spent years building high performing software teams and helping organizations navigate change. In this episode, we will unpack how AI is reshaping software development, the skills engineers will need to thrive, why leadership matters more than ever, and what the future of software teams might look like over the next decade. Cameo, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Camille, you spent years building and leading technology teams. From your perspective, what has fundamentally changed in software development because of AI, and what parts of the craft remain just unchanged despite all the excitement?
In a way, I feel like right now there is such a dichotomy of what's happening. Um, for teams that were not very modern, which is the majority of teams that were not using the best practices. I mean, they might feel like things have changed because make no mistake, almost all code right now is written by AI,
Right.
regardless of team. That's what's happening. But after the code is written, for those teams, their infrastructure is broken. Their DevOps is non-existent. They don't have concepts of continuous development. They don't have CI/CD pipelines. They might claim they do, but they don't run them that way.
Right.
And so for those teams, I feel like AI has hurt them as much as anything.
Mm.
Um, I see teams very much struggling to get the impact from the AI. It's writing the code, but then the code runs directly into a PR practice that is completely dependent on one senior guy that now is just drowning in these PRs. So that's this one side of software where the bad practices are being amplified. On the flip side, where teams were actually ready to use AI and have that kind of more maturity, everything has changed. It, I think in a lot of ways, it's, I've never seen such a big transformation in how things get built as what is happening for those best of teams.
How far does that transformation go? There's a lot of noise around AI replacing developers. What do you consider the biggest examples of hype there versus realities inside engineering teams today?
So I think a lot of the hype is based on developers being able to see how much quicker the AI can write
Right.
the code than they can. And so I think the hype is absolutely warranted. I think in the companies that I work with and the teams that I put together, teams that 4 years ago were the quintessential two pizza team, like
Yeah.
probably 5 or 6 people. Um, those are three people teams now, predominantly. Um, I think it would be pretty hard to justify a larger team in today's environment. Now, for the companies that I see that are savvy and that are starting to like really accelerate, most of them aren't reducing the headcount. They're increasing their ambition. of
Right.
what they can achieve with their engineering um, kind of muscle and their engineering might. But where there are some, sadly, and I don't think your audience will be shocked by this, but I am seeing it really have an impact on designers.
Yeah.
Um, Here's what I kind of think has been interesting about how things have changed. It used to be that if people had ideas about what they wanted to build, even coming out of engineering, everybody would write it down and you'd end up with this bulleted list of here's the next feature or the next thing I want for this software. People aren't doing that anymore. They're coming to those conversations with a design and with a lot of, in their mind, the problem has been solved.
Yeah.
And so I see for a lot of engineers, somewhat their job has become more advisory than it's ever been before, where they're given something with almost this expectation that now they're going to go work with their Claude and that this is what should come out the other side. Um, which I guess shows we just never really got people to the understanding of why we do agile, right?
Yeah.
We should assume we're wrong, even when Claude helps us make it, or whatever, Codex or however you're building your code. But that mindset hasn't shifted yet. So I do see a lot of teams that they almost feel like they've gotten to be more kind of order takers, and it already was bad.
Right.
Where the C-suite is coming in or the stakeholders are coming in and have already kind of quote unquote developed a first version. And so then engineering is, I don't want to be say the naysayer. They're the voice of reason that understands what is actually capable, what the possibility is, because Claude or any AI, as we all know, can make mistakes. And I think one of those big mistakes is that they're really mostly capable of building what we've already built before.
Yeah.
Whereas great engineering minds is all about unlocking the possible.
Yeah.
It's why I've always been an advocate for bring your engineers in as early as possible, because if you make all your plans without their insights, you don't know, you're going to miss out on the innovation, right? Because you need your engineers for the, not that other people can't have innovative ideas, but like the person who understands how to build the thing the best is going to be the person who knows where they can push the boundaries. So I just think it's a very interesting dynamic, and especially for engineering leadership, where they are being kind of told what to do more because decisions have been made in rooms that they're not in by the CEO and the COO and a Claude instance that write up a whole bunch of UI for them and say, okay, here's what we're going to build. Go do it, engineer.
Two questions that come to mind as you speak. The first one, engineering and product seem to be merging in some way, or as you say, engineers become the advisors that need to sort of push back or ask the questions, the hard questions that maybe nobody asked when they were vibe coding something, right?
Uh,
And at the same time, product can go way further on imagining and then just putting that in front of engineering. And at least what I see is a lot of, gone are the days of, okay, just back end engineer, front end engineer. It's like merging, and you see more people that are way more powerful, but
mhm,
more like architects that can see the whole picture, and that's why they are way more powerful, right? So that's
mhm,
the first one. Do you see a merging of design, product, and engineers into a super role of AI product engineer? And
uh-huh.
the second question is, do you think that actually we are just moving the bottleneck, as you just said, and it used to be, drafting the requirements, and now it's about PRs, but it's also about skipping all the right steps that we should take to learn what to build, what not to build, etc., etc.
Yeah, and I have lots of thoughts on that one, but let's talk about the merging first. Um, AI is funny because it it gives everybody the idea that they understand everybody else's domain better. Product, especially, even I would say among technical product managers, and this isn't going to be a popular opinion, but they don't know engineering. They don't, right? And like I'm really technical, but I am not a software engineer, and I know that, which is why I how I work is structured around a pairing of my business expertise as a product person with an engineer's engineering expertise. Now, if you're an engineer who happens to have an MBA and be a super savvy salesperson and really understand business, then you definitely don't need product and you have a superpower. And if you actually understand user experience and the psychology of what drives demand and why it's important to get demand for a product before you build it, but a business person should know, then you have a superpower and you don't need the product people. And the same, I suppose, if you're a product person who has an engineering background that's deep enough, then you don't. But my hope is rather than those two roles merging, is we just develop almost like tightly coupled pairs, where you want those two pieces of expertise. And I'm not discounting user experience because it's probably the most important of the three things. It's what actually makes a product something. I don't know. That's a whole other conversation, but right now, like everybody's focused more on forward momentum, and we haven't had the flashback or the repercussions of releasing a bunch of slop onto the world yet. So
Yeah,
that will come, and then user experience will start to become much more appreciated because Claude does some super cool things, and OpenAI has some cool tools, but there's nothing that substitutes for actually understanding how to build great customer experiences.
got it.
I don't know if I actually answered your
You did, you
question.
did, you did, and you gave me a great segue to the next question. So, customer expectations, right?
Hmm.
How hard has it become for you to manage customer expectations? Are they accelerating as AI speeds up development? How do you, from a product and engineering perspective, manage expectations when customers assume everything can be built instantly?
It it is a very interesting challenge because people do have this idea that complexity has completely compressed. And certainly on the kind of the UI side, the ability to generate prototypes and simple wireframes and that it's very, very fast to do it. But trying to educate to a customer how complexity impacts speed is a lot of just kind of pulling back the hood of the car and showing them how much complexity. The best way I've found to do it is that we spend more time with our customers talking about non-functional attributes than a lot of companies do. Because an interesting thing that's long been true in software is if somebody goes and hires someone to make them software, whether it's an internal team to make them something or a consultancy, there is an assumption in that customer's minds about what they get when they buy software engineering. And in their minds, they have 100% performance, they have 100% manageability, they have 100% security, right? Non-functional attributes, as you know, don't work like that. They have a tendency to impact each other.
Yeah.
So if you have really high security, you have really, you're going to have a really bad user experience or a lot more costs on being able to develop your software. But nobody's ever educated business stakeholders about what non-functional attributes are or why they matter for how we build software. So one of the best ways to have conversations about speed is to show them like the complexity that's part of the software that they've always been using. So that you can say, okay, Do you want 100% security? Your customers are going to hate it because they've got 2FA every single time they log in, and we're going to take their fingerprint. And so they're going to loathe your application. How secure do you actually need to be? You're going to have a whole lot less complexity there if, gosh, maybe you don't even need a authentication at all. Do you need to sign in? That's an assumption we make that all software should have a login, but does it need to? So anyway, that's one of the first things that's really helped us is helping to educate them. Because if you've got race conditions and like people just don't understand anything about software. So you just have
Yeah.
to you have to help them understand, and then you have to make them prioritize what matters to them so that when there's resulting that when it's slower, you can say it's because we're making your software more manageable. And everybody's operating on the belief of why it's slow and what we're getting out of it.
What makes up a good customer for you? And are there times where you just find customers that maybe are not a fit and they don't want to understand this, and you have to just let them go, or how does that work for you?
I think well, luckily the way I run software in my organization quickly illustrates whether or not somebody's a good fit for me. So we start every single project with a sprint that we call the blueprint sprint. That is a process where we essentially decide on what version one is going to be collectively, with a decent amount of user research involved so that we're not just making those assumptions and planning a roadmap, based on those assumptions, but where we're also having these conversations about how we're going to prioritize the non-functional attributes, and where we're forcing all the stakeholders to participate in the decision-making process. And it's a lot like a design sprint. It's pretty immersive, and we plan out that whole V1. If they're not willing to do that, that is an instant red flag to me because stakeholders are really funny. Like they want the results without having to sit through the decisions, but the decisions you make are what get you results, right?
Yeah.
And anytime you have key stakeholders that haven't explicitly made decisions, those decisions are what slow down a project. Every engineer in the world, you can ask them if they've ever spent time sitting on their hands waiting for a decision from a C-suite. And I'll bet almost everyone you can find has spent at least a week in their career on some projects, probably multiple weeks, where they're maybe fiddling on this thing over here or doing this other thing, but a key decision to move the project forward is in an unmade state by an executive, right? It's par for the course. So the process, it gives us a clear visibility on all the assumptions across all the stakeholders. It forces those decisions to be made, and then we can get user feedback before we move into the actual development process, which always ends up changing what we're going to build anyway. If people aren't interested in doing that, I know they're not a good fit for me because they're not interested in planning, but they're also not actually interested in um, the the awkwardness of like actually figuring out how to build the right thing and then even being willing to test it and have every single one of those assumptions being wrong and having to go back and do it again. A lot of people don't want their idea to be wrong.
Right.
And so a lot of software is kicking the can down so that they don't have to be confronted with how bad their idea is for as long as possible. It's a very cynical way to,
No,
to
I
think of
love it. I love it. Do you think AI has changed in any way that decision making? Because on one end, I tend to think, okay, anyone can prototype faster right now. So you are confronted with at least the first decision making of the idea you're picturing in your head. Okay, what does it look like, right? Because there's that part, like the part of doing a blueprint, a wireframe, whatever. That part seems to have accelerated. Do
Mhm.
you think that's
Oh,
true or not? And do you think that maybe that part accelerated, but at the same time they get a baby and Claude is telling them your baby is beautiful, and then they just fall in love with that and they don't want to move forward? What do you see there?
I definitely see that. People come to me and they're like, well, I don't need to go through your process because I've already answered all of these questions.
Right.
And I say, okay, that's great. we're going to still build software, and now you're going to get to answer those same questions, you and whichever AI you used, with our engineer, because the context is still key for AI, and there's going to be gaps in that. And AI can be wrong. It says it on the bottom of all of those pages.
Yeah.
So we're still going to do the process. And I absolutely have lost customers who say, well, Claude already told me it's a good idea, or ChatGPT, we got it worked out. I'm just going to go build it myself. Um, so yeah, there's a lot more confidence because people feel like they went through the design sprint with the AI that they used or the effort. If if they haven't talked to any customers, it's not valid.
Yeah.
Um, because all a good prototype shows you is that you can prompt. It doesn't show you that anybody cares about the problem or that you solved the problem in the right way. Now, for software, like I actually see there is probably going to be a decent amount of engineering effort on the tooling side, helping companies test ideas faster.
Hmm.
Because you can spin up a pretty cool prototype in a day, get it pretty well thought through, and then go out and figure out how to test that at a decent amount of scale. But now it's almost more like a marketing job. It's just marketing for a product that doesn't exist yet, but the engineering that infrastructure to run those kinds of experiments at a large scale.
When you think about the engineer of the future, what skills do you think will be more important, um, and what traditional engineering skills remain essential?
I I think there's a ton of opportunity for engineers just in general in I'm just going to use the big DevOps umbrella. Um, you know, AI is getting better at running itself, but the operationalization of AI and a lot of people who aren't technical are messing in waters that they do not understand.
Right.
I think there are some pretty big reckonings that are going to happen. We see increased security breaches even across the biggest of companies, as they're not keeping up with what AI is doing inside of cybersecurity and on the risk side and the maturity that's escalating. The Hugging Face breach is a
Yep.
great example of that. Um, and I think there's going to be lots of almost like AI partnerships inside of organizations. I see maybe IT and development in general, kind of almost like just branching out so that you have maybe an embedded AI engineer on every single team
Right.
that is helping build automations, uh, essentially like a forward deployed engineer, but inside each organization or sub-organization that's part of the sales team that maybe is hired because they have some background and expertise in that domain, and then they're embedded in that domain, just optimizing for that domain. I think that that's a pretty likely, because truthfully, non-technical people at the end of the day, they don't want to write software.
No.
Even if it's so much easier than it's ever been before, like the quickest way to know that is just to still put somebody in front of a CLI before they've decided that they want, like, it just makes them want to cry. They're like, why is this? It's awful. So, yeah, I think we will see more embedded teams. I or individuals. I'm not sure if well, here's just a little side thing. I don't believe software teams have behaved like teams for a long, long time. And this is just kind of my little rant. I blame Jira because it essentially, well, I blame Jira and the fact that businesses never liked the idea of pair programming or mobbing. More eyes on the same problem generally get you better results on
Right.
solving the problem. There's just a ton of data. Um, but micromanagers that took Agile and made Agile a tracking system with their friends Jira or whatever tracker people are using It's a very single-threaded thing because you can't track individual accountability when people are in a mob.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the business wants to track individual efficacy so that they can reward people on an individual basis.
Right.
And so you end up with this, it just software hasn't been a team sport. It's so rare to run into a team where you see, even if you have really, really supportive leaders and really, really team like guys and girls that are working a lot together, it's rare to see a whole group of people just sitting around mobbing around one particular problem. So I think we kind of killed teams inadvertently way before AI came along and killed teams. I'd love to see the concept of team come back. And hopefully we'll get more tools where developers can all be sharing one instance and one project for each of the things that they're trying to do of whichever AI they're using, so that we can bring back some of the ideas around pair programming. The value of pair programming isn't actually about the code any more than any of this was ever technically about the code. I mean, you have to use the code, but pair programming is powerful because two people are solving a problem together and double checking assumptions and beliefs about how the problem's been solved in the past. And we we almost need it more with AI because AI can be so wrong and because we're incredibly susceptible to its lies. So if you at least have one other person to be like, wait a minute, what are we
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah.
Anyway, my little rant about teams. I Right now we don't have teams. I don't think teams will subsist for very long. I think a lot of we'll have like one, maybe two people teams or maybe three people teams. So like a product person, a an engineer, and TBD if it'll be just two-person teams or UX or who even knows what's happening with QA. I don't know. I'm not a believer in a separate QA. I think it's engineering's job to write good software and then to check its own work. So of all the things I would love to see go away, it's the idea of a separate QA.
Long gone are the days then of the two pizzas, maybe one pizza at the most.
Maybe, yeah, I think it's a one pizza. I think it's a one pizza team. Um, long gone for two people. Lots of companies still have them. And
Yeah.
so and like I said on my first answer about the difference between how teams that already had established and adopted best practices and have a stable infrastructure are operating versus teams that don't. Um, I have seen some small, people are getting benefits still from AI and from AI code, and even companies that have pretty dysfunctional development organizations, I think are still seeing value and improvement.
Yeah.
They're just not seeing it at the scale that, an organization that's already eliminated all manual testing and doesn't use PRs because they're using TDD and they've totally mastered it. They are more prepared for understanding how to truly leverage agents. They're more prepared for building harnesses around how AI impacts how you build things because they understand how to think about quality first in a way that other teams just do not have even the mindset.
So agile went wrong when we started focusing more on the input and the process than the output and the outcome. Is that am I hearing you correctly? We just
Yes.
forgot about the outcome.
Yeah. We just forgot about the outcome. Well, and it's interesting because I've worked in agile transformation companies. I worked at a company that was at Ford Motors on their fourth year of an agile transformation, which is just it's millions of dollars in agile transformation. And when you got down into the weeds with teams that had supposed they were agile teams, I wouldn't say anything they were doing in the least bit. I mean, like they have everybody has meetings that they call the couple of meeting titles, right? They have a
Yeah.
stand up, they have a sprint planning, but that's it. Most teams do not produce working tested software every 2 weeks or on whatever their sprint cycle is. So, I mean, I don't know who to blame when you have a tool. If it says one of the key things you should be doing is delivering something you can get customer feedback. It's
Yeah.
like one of the key tenets. Nobody's doing it. So if nobody's doing that, should we call what they're doing agile?
Yeah.
It probably has some other name. It's agile rituals where they're doing all the rituals. Well, but they're not because they're not doing the thing that actually matters the most, which is put the software in somebody's hands so they can tell you whether that's what they want or not and if it solves their problem. Like that's like the one thing nobody's doing.
I had Jeff Sutherland, co-creator of
Oh,
Scrum, here in the
yeah.
podcast, and he was
Oh,
so
that's so
mad
cool.
about this. He was talking about this exactly what you're just saying, and he was like, "They call it agile, but they are not doing agile." He was like really pissed off at it.
I I don't always agree with him, although I've seen him speak and he's fantastic. I think it's cool that you've had him on, but it anytime we talk about agile and failures of agile and what's to blame and all the stuff that you see people debate about, at the end of the day, it does come down to that one thing. If you are not giving people the software, the key thing to building better software is to give it to people as early as possible and get their feedback.
Yeah,
That is the key thing, which by the way is where AI is so transformative because absolutely I can spin up really, really great things in a day that I would never deploy in any place. But I can get customer feedback on day one.
yeah,
And and then I can make good choices and I don't feel bad about throwing away what I just built. And it's a huge deal, but it's funny because most people still aren't actually leveraging that they'll generate that prototype and then they'll show it to stakeholders.
yeah.
Or, they're not nobody wants to talk to the customer. I don't know why.
And do
Because
you?
they'll tell them no.
Yeah, 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 you know, they will kill the precious baby.
Yeah, they'll
Um,
kill the precious baby.
have you seen also? Sometimes I've seen engineers also that now with AI they also sort of go in a tangent and start building something, and then it gets gold plated everywhere. And it's like when they come back for a demo, you're like, what?
What did you do that?
What? Why? I mean, or why didn't you ask me sooner, right? Because I'm also, you just did all this work, you know. Have you seen that a little bit, or not so much?
I've seen it a fair bit. Um, and I used to see it even before AI.
Right.
And then it was more painful. Um,
More work.
w a lot more work where you'd be like, why is this guy not done? And every day he's in stand up saying, well, I'm making progress. And then he gets to the end and you're like, well, that was a 2 day job that you spent 2 weeks on because, which, by the way, coming back to Agile, that's part of what daily stand-up is supposed to solve
Yeah.
if you're having the right conversations, right? Dude or lady should say, well, I just decided I wanted to do all these other things. Um, and but that's a management problem, not an AI
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
And maybe not just a management problem, but a little bit of a teamwork problem.
Yeah.
Often engineers, because they're not brought into the problem space and kind of the whole conversation early enough, they they're not really treated like a collaborator. And so a lot of times those behaviors is a little bit partially them responding to uncertainty, because anytime you give people uncertainty, they try and fill in the gaps. So, I kind of think a lot of that is engineers wanting to be the best engineer that they can. And they're seeing in their mind opportunities to solve the problem better. But just like the business stakeholder who built the whole roadmap and dropped it in engineering's lap, if that
Yeah.
engineer isn't close enough to the problem to say, oh, maybe the customer doesn't need this. Or maybe if nobody's ever had an explicit conversation about non-functional attributes, they don't know what level of any of those attributes they need to be aiming for. And if the engineering organization isn't sophisticated enough to say, here's how we handle security across the application, or here's how we handle manageability, here's the expectation for XYZ, I think it's mostly people trying to do their very, very best. They see an opportunity to solve the problem even better,
Yep.
but it's because they're not part of a team and they don't feel also the confidence because they're not part of a true team to say, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing this thing because I think it will solve the problem better," and having that conversation in a trusted environment to say, "Well, dude, we kind of don't need that. Here's why we
Yeah.
don't need it."
Yeah. So where do you think management fits in all of this in the future? We're talking smaller teams. We're talking potentially, software engineers or AI engineers embedded within a functional team, which gets them closer to the business and the problem they are solving for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where does management fall in all of this in a world where there will be agents, humans collaborating, the whole thing? Is there a role for management? Not so much, different. What are your thoughts there?
There, I believe there is always a role for management, partially because some people respond better to having managers. And I know that because I'm an entrepreneur who has struggled with some parts of my entrepreneur job because there's nobody there that says I have to do it, right? The things that are like on the sell side that I don't love.
Yeah,
If I had a boss who said you have to get this done, I'd probably get it done. So I truly believe that there are people who both want managers and need managers. But even coming back to that last conversation that we were having, people are going to build more than they need. People are going to make bad decisions. How do you solve for that if you don't have management?
right.
If my personal opinion is in organizations that are flat, unless they're very, very high performing, which typically takes a really great leader at the very, very top,
Yep.
they're mostly chaos. And a lot of people making themselves into leaders because no because somebody needs to be in charge, and then the natural leaders just rise to the top anyway and start just bossing people. I mean, I tell you, I'm going to boss people around if it looks like there's uncertainty about what needs to be done. I'm going to tell people what to do. And so yeah, I don't think things get flat. um AIs are really hard to manage, so I think that I think that that's going to be its own thing. I think there has to be a management layer, and maybe it's as teams get fractured, maybe you have one leader who's I don't know. I really have no idea what's going to happen.
Interesting. It's an interesting one. I know it was a tough one to answer.
No, it's
Um,
good.
I don't know the answer also. So, I want to ask you a last question, and this is more about your personal story. What drew you into technology? What are some of the milestones that shaped your career, your mindset, and how has that mindset changed or evolved over the years?
I like that question. Um, I come from a really nerdy family, so technology, and we had the very first computer that my dad could possibly afford. And then we had computers my entire time growing up. So, I played on an Amiga and I had a Commodore 64. And so I always felt comfortable with technology, although, I wasn't deeply involved in it. In fact, my first email address, my dad got for me and came and brought a computer to my house because he was so excited about email and he wanted the whole family to be able to communicate on email. So that was my very first email address. But I have a lot of comfort with technology. I wanted to be a rock star, and I actually spent most of my 20s trying to be a rock star. I was in a band, we toured, we did the whole thing. And then we did not get rich and famous. And so then I needed a real job. And I was a college dropout who had been trying to be a rock star for many years. So that doesn't qualify you for very many jobs. Um, but I'd been living in the Bay. I had a new kid and I was coming back home. And my brother said, Hey, he was a software developer. He said, Hey, we had this really great opportunity fall in our lap. We're three developers and we can't get anything done. We just need somebody really bossy to come and tell us what to do. And so they hired me as a project manager and kind of an account manager. I ended up joining their company and they were building MLM software. And so I was the fourth founder. And it was definitely a trial by fire. I couldn't get them to do anything either, in spite of my native bossiness. And so, probably one of the first milestones for me was I had to figure out how to get software developers to get me output, which took me down this whole agile path. And this was 2004. So agile was still kind of a young conversation, but I ended up getting us agile training as a team, really saw how it impacted our efficacy. But then I also had a bunch of brutal experiences where, we had a software as a service. We didn't call it that back then, honestly, but we had a software that we were selling, but we were doing heavy customization per customer. And I had so many experiences where I would sit down with a customer, we'd decide what we were building, I'd go back to the team, we'd build it, we'd bring it back, and the customer would say, That's not what I wanted.
Right.
And I'd be like, dude, like I was with you 2 weeks ago. We talked about it, which then took me into product and really how difficult it is to actually build what people want, even when they tell you exactly what they want, because they lie or they don't understand and they don't understand how to build good software and all of that. And so anyway, that got me into software. And then I worked in agencies pretty much the rest of my career. And when the design thinking thing got really big, that felt like such a solve for that debate that had always been there on like, how do you actually build what people want?
Right.
Build the smallest increment, get it in front of them in a couple of days, and then it just solves all the problems. So those are probably some of my biggest milestones. I could, of course, anybody can talk about themselves all day, but
I love it. What type of music did you play with your band?
Um, but rock, kind of alternative rock. You know, kind of like Garbage, if you're familiar with that
Yeah,
band.
yeah. So
Um,
grunge, grunge.
yeah, like late grunge. I mean, it's pretty poppy. I don't think I could call it grunge, but it is rock. We had a guitarist, and I was the lead singer, and um, it's still available on Spotify. You can be my sixth listener for the month. It's called Velvet Alex.
Velvet
All one
Alex. I'm
Velvet
going to
Velvet
check it
Alex.
out.
Yes,
Do you,
you
do
can.
you still do you still do any music?
Um, just kind of mostly for myself. Me and my husband have a music studio downstairs, and I putter, but
That's
not very.
beautiful. Do you think that you have some of that creativity in you, or the understanding of a band, an output? There's so much in there. Do you think there is anything you draw from those years that still helps you understand groups of people?
I think it's around collaboration. Collaborating in a band to write music is incredibly vulnerable, but all creating is incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think about the times I've seen engineers get really angry and defensive about an idea that or something they've been working on, or UX people. And it's because people pour their heart and soul in, a lot of people, and the people we want to work around pour their heart and soul into that craft. And then seeing it criticized or hearing that it's not the right thing, it makes them feel very attacked. And so I do think the experience of creating music with other people maybe gives me more empathy
Yeah.
into just how much we do bring ourselves into the work of building software. even if what we're building is dumb and we don't give a crap about it, we're still the average person is going to bring their creativity and their heart into it.
How much is craft? How much is art when you're building software?
A whole lot of it is craft. I think that there is, and I don't even know. Yeah, I don't know. I maybe the word craft is has art inherently in it.
Right, right.
Um, I, we tend to think of craft as describing something that's more repeatable than the word art. Software's not incredibly repeatable in a lot of ways, but a lot of it still is, you know?
Right.
I don't know. I think that's a fun question. You should start asking that of everyone.
Definitely. And then last one. What energizes you, or what makes you say, yes, I want to work with this person? And what are some things that you just don't want to surround yourself with?
I love being around people who want to be really innovative and who want to try and push what's possible. Um, I think one of the more disappointing things in software is how much of all of our time we spend just building widgets.
Yeah.
And in general, think one of the most exciting things about AI is there's a lot of phenomenal engineers in the world. What happens when they have all these superpowers and they can start pursuing different ways to solve the same problems? Because we just keep solving problems the same super ineffective ways.
Yeah.
And I think that the potential for immense breakthroughs, even in mundane things, is super, super exciting. And like, I'm so invigorated. I am not a doomer about AI at all. I think it's the unlock that humanity needs. And I think it could issue in the golden age if we can keep it from destroying us first.
I love it, and we're going to end up with that phrase. Cameo, this has been an amazing. I truly, I love I just love reading you on LinkedIn. I love your content. I love the way you speak. I love the way you talk about certain things, how candid you are, and how clear you are. And I knew this was going to be a great episode, and it was. So thank you, and I hope we can stay in touch and maybe do this again in the future.
I would love that. It's been the highlight of my week, maybe my month. So I just really enjoyed the conversation. And I think we didn't even get to one of the questions. So it's I started to write it down and then we it was right after the merging one. You told me to write it down. We were going to go to it next.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I think you covered it in a way.
I probably just
I
covered it.
think you did. I
Anyway,
think I think you did. I think you did. But hey,
it was
we have something for our next episode already.
it was so great to talk to you. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.